what questions do you have before we dive into our practice? Is everybody feeling comfortable? We can probably maybe add in the chat what you think. If scale of 1 to 5, what you're thinking? Are you feeling comfortable with this? 5 being the most and 1 being the least. Nigel.
Yeah, I was just curious as in your experience, right?
Yeah.
In the job environment itself, do they use command line for these, or they use well, what's the word for example, the Visual Studio,
The IDE?
Yeah, the integrated development environment, exactly.
Yeah, so it depends. Let me see. Oops, I need to escape from here. Unfortunately, I cannot. Yeah, it depends on the case in point, right? If you want to test something quickly, a line of code, then you can use your command line, as we've been using even in Anaconda. Anaconda does have a command line. So when we create a new file, you can get a new notebook. Like when you click plus, you can get a new notebook or a new console or a new terminal. So depending on which one you want to use. So if we want a new Anaconda console, then that's probably what, I'm not sure if that's what Fabian was having issues with yesterday. He ended up with a console with Visual Studio Code. So you can just write your code in here. Let's say where is my code? If, let's start with 1, x is equal to 10. If x is greater than 0, print x and execute that. So again, here you have a Python console, so it's not really going to make much difference. You just write that each time and execute it, and you have your output. So it depends on what you probably want to use in that case. So let's say if you try using a terminal. Again, terminal, you have to go ahead and type in Python to get into the Python environment. So this is an integrated, I shouldn't say integrated, this is an interactive environment. We can do the same thing here and say x equal to 10. And then we can go ahead and say if x is greater than 0. When we use a column in an interactive environment, it's going to give us 3 dots to show that, hey, you're still writing a compound statement, you need to continue. But since we are not using an IDE, we have to give our own spaces. If I go ahead and just say print x, it's going to give me an error because it's expecting an indentation block. Okay, so that's why it's very, very prevalent. It's very popular to use an IDE because all of these problems are taken care of for us. Here again, it's black and white. You cannot really differentiate. It's not easily readable. You don't have autocomplete. You don't have all those other extensions that can be added in there for you. You don't have color coding. You don't have tips that are going to be given to you like, hey, there's an error here, there's an error there, and so on and so forth. So very few people use the command line. More people are going to use either let me go to day 4. They're going to use either a notebook, which is good because I can do all of this. I can even go in and add, let's say, instead of, let's see, I can add a cell at the top. And instead of having this cell as a code, I can have a markup and say, this is going to be H1. I don't remember how to write it. But let's say, let me just say 1. Change that. I've changed it to a markdown. If I execute it, nothing happens. It's just a header. I can go in there and change it. I can make it to be raw HTML. If I make it to be raw HTML, I can use H1, which is header 1. And execute that. Everything can be done in here and can be made to look really good and easy for me. So now it looks big. I can decide to print this in PDF or save it or export it as an HTML, and it becomes a simple web page per se. So if I export it as an HTML, I should be able to see, oops, unfortunately I have an error in this case, 500 error. But yeah, that's probably because I don't have the right extension. But it's up to you, whichever one you want to use. Just get comfortable using either one of them and you should be good. Sounds good?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. From what I've explained, I think you'll be better using this console right here.
Yes, you can use notebook per se. I keep trying to say notepad. Or you can use your Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is also very good to use. And Personally, I think Visual Studio Code is okay. It's better, like I explained yesterday. That way you can start pushing your code to Git. As you can see, mine is still running. I probably need to close it. But here you can send your code to Git and then make your updates as you need. Okay. Sounds good. Excellent. So let's go back into our examples that we have for today. So let's try some while loops, right? While loops with unknown number of iterations. Can anyone think of any examples so far? So a good example might be if you want to find out how many payments you have for a loan. You don't really know how many payments you have, okay? So maybe decide how much the loan amount is, decide how many payments each time, and calculate how many times you're going to be making that payment. So that's one example. You can also maybe look at I can't remember which other example would be a good one. You can also ask the user to enter values and then enter a particular number to exit out of that value. Okay, so say you want to be able to ask them to enter numbers and at some point tell them, hey, you've entered a particular code or a particular word that will say, okay, that's the end of the line for you. So let me use that as an example actually. And let's see what would be a good example. Maybe calculate maximum and minimum of numbers. Do I want to use that? Yeah, might as well. Okay.
I thought you came up with something like mortgage calculator or something.
Yeah, I want to save that mortgage for the for loop though, but that's
okay.
fine. I'll go ahead and use the mortgage for this one. So let's try it out. Example. Do I have a folder for examples? No, I don't. So we'll just use this same one. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get loan. I don't know if I want to use mortgage. Let's just start with a car loan for starters. Let's say get car loan details. So first thing we want to know is what's the amount owed, right? So let's say your amount owed, you get the user to enter the amount that they currently owe. How much is your car mortgage or car loan? Question mark would be good. And make sure that if you put the first quote or the first parenthesis applies to the input, you need another parenthesis for the float. Okay. If we did that in Visual Studio Code, it would definitely help us out with the automatic closures, opening and closing it. Okay. So we've gotten that, and we need to know what's the APR, maybe interest rate. So let's say interest. Probably just copy this over again. Nope, I did not. How much is your interest rate? We want to make it monthly or annual. Say annual interest rate. Next, you want to see what payments you're So how much will you pay each month in dollars, maybe? Okay, I already copied this, so I should just paste it. Yeah. How much is your monthly payment? Finally, we want to also get how many months. We want to get how many months, and yeah, let's just go ahead and have 0 in there for now, because we want to find out how many months it's going to take us to pay that loan off, right? So to get the monthly rate for the interest, let's say monthly interest, how do we get the monthly interest? Any ideas? Monthly interest would be our annual interest, right? Let me change this to APR. So monthly interest will be our APR.
So it should be APR divided by 12?
Divided by 12.
Mhm.
But to make it a percent, let's also divide it by 100. that tells us the percentage monthly rate. Let's make this bigger a little bit. There you go. All right. So what do we need to do? Now we want to make sure that while our condition here is while the payment is greater than 0, amount owed, sorry. While the amount owed is greater than 0, we need to continue payments. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So first, in order for us to make payment, we have to add our interest, right? So to make payment, let's say our interest paid should be equal to, because interest is what's first paid before we make a, should I say, base payment, right? So interest paid will be the amount that you owe and your monthly rate. So amount owed multiplied by that percentage APR. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And now our money owed,
Mhm.
or amount owed, would then be equal to amount owed plus the interest.
Mhm.
So if you know that your card loan is $100, never ever in the history of mankind, and your interest is 10%, then your total amount owed would be that plus your interest.
Can we make that variable total amount owed to differentiate from the other assigned one amount owed?
Yes, so let's go ahead and do a total amount owed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But then we're saying that our amount owed should be greater than that 0. So total amount owed, again, this is okay because we've assigned it in there. So once we do that, we want to go ahead and check. Maybe we don't want to do that yet. So let's make a payment, right? Let's first say calculate interest. So to make a payment, how do we make a payment? We go ahead and reduce that payment from the money owed, right? So to do that, money owed, or total amount owed, now be equals to, sign, minus our payments. So each month we're going to make that payment, and then we also want to update the months, right? Update the month. Our months now should be equal to months plus 1. So that's the first month we've made a payment. Now we want to be able to print our results, right? That way everybody can see what has been going on. So to print our results, our very friendly print statement, go ahead and say you paid payments, of which, oopsie, we made that payment, and let's put a full stop. Including interest here. That's interest. Including that interest. That makes sense? So payments, we paid that, including blah, 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 interest. And maybe I should go ahead and also print the month. Month number. So first month, you paid that, and so on and so forth. Finally, let's also tell us what we owe. Balance. Now, total money owed. That makes sense? So again, I might want to go ahead and just print, I don't know, an extra space, let's say asterisk, to differentiate each time I make a payment. Is everybody okay with what we have so far? Let's make this smaller. So to get the car loan details, we don't know how many times it's going to take us to pay our loan. So we go ahead and check while the amount owed is greater than 0. Actually, I think I should have calculated. Yeah, the interest keeps changing each time. That's fine. At the end of the day, let's say we have a final print statement. Oops, I forgot to close that. Hold on. And we can fire this off and see how many times it's going to take us to make payments. Sounds good? So let's go ahead and execute. So how much is your car loan? Let's say 8,500. How much is your percentage APR? Let's make it easy, 10%, since it's easily. How much is your monthly payment? Let's pay 500 per month. So it tells us now that month number 1, we paid 500, including $70.83, which is interest. My balance will now be $80.70. Month number 2, you make another payment, month number 3, and so on and so forth. As you keep paying 500, you can see you're gonna have a long ways to go to pay off this loan. Okay, so we're down all the way to 75 months. We still have a balance of, I think I'm printing something wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, for $8,000 and $500 a month.
Oops, I scrolled too fast. Yeah, I'm printing something wrong here. I'm printing the wrong balance, I believe. So total amount owed. Total amount owed. What am I printing? Total amount owed. But that was updated. So the first time it updated it, but it did not update the balance the second time. So what am I doing here? Oh, I see why. That's because I keep multiplying this on here. So I don't want that to be the case. So that's because we changed that to total amount owed. This amount never changes. This amount is always going to be, oopsie, my CPU is running low. Come on, close that. Yep, so this amount is what's causing it to change. So that should not be the right one. So total amount owed should not have been updated. So that was the trick that Aaron made me fall for. Okay, so your amount owed needs to be updated to include the interest. That's why we're having an error message. And we're never gonna get out of this loop. We fell into an infinite loop.
Yeah.
Okay, so eventually.
But actually,
yes.
This is my best part, though. This is my best part, right?
Yes.
Trying to understand why your stuff is not working.
Why your code is not working? Yes, that's
Yes.
why you need to make these errors. So let's go ahead and update that code. So interesting. Let's see how that pans out. Eventually it's gonna crash because it keeps running and running, as you can see right here. But excellent, excellent. So let's jump into Visual Studio Code, because obviously on here I should be able to kick myself out easily. This should have been in there. That's fine. I'll cancel the move. I'll move that later on. Let's go ahead and create a new folder. Nope, that's not what I want to do. That's where I want to create a folder and call it day 4. Awesome. Inside day 4, let's create a new file and call it loan.py. Now, loan.py, what do we need to do again? Let me go and grab everything that I typed in here earlier and paste it in there. So go ahead and paste that in there. Yay. And we're in business. All good? So I think this is a different piece of code though. Let's go ahead and make sure I'm getting the right piece of code. Come on, come on. There you go. And there we go. Awesome. So as you can see now with an IDE, I can see mistakes that I made because I was trying to update my code. Now it's been updated. Okay. Let's see if this works out. To make a payment, the amount owed should be equal to amount owed minus our payments. Everything looks good. The only difference I did was I changed all those other new fields I had. So let's run this. Yeah, I don't like when it looks like this actually. So our car loan, let's try again, 800,500. Annual APR rate is, let's say, 0.02. Monthly payment, let's stick to the 500 again. And you can see that it took us 18 months to make that payment. Is everybody with me so far? I don't know why this is breaking up for me. I don't want it to break up like this. I want it to get the whole thing. And I'll go ahead and clear this out again so that we can see one more time. Let's go ahead and execute it. How much is your car loan? 8,500. How much is your APR rate? Let's say if it's 3, if it's 5%, that would be 0.5. And our monthly payment, let's go with 500 again. Again, it's taking us 4 months. But you can see that the balance is low. The balance is low because on month number 17, we had just $3 for our balance, right? That $3 for our balance, we need to be able to probably add some piece of code to make sure that we don't overpay at the end of the month. Does that make sense to everybody? So to make sure we don't overpay, we probably just want to add another condition. So you're making a payment that gives you the total amount of payment. But before we make a payment, we want to check if balance is less than payment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So again, just a simple condition. If money owed amount owed is less than payments, then we go ahead and just pay the amount owed rather than paying everything all together. So in this case, oh, why do I have this? Variable amount owed is float. Expected. Oh, never mind. That's because okay, that's fine. So let's indent it. If that's the case, let's go ahead and be nice and tell them what's going on. You'd say last payment is, let's give that the money owed, right? Amount owed. Now we can go ahead and say, hey, guess what? Print the fact that paid, oopsie, paid off your loan in months +1 because we haven't added it yet at the end, right? So we pay that off in months +1 months. After that, we're done. So if we're done, what do? We break. Get out of that loop. And then all of these don't need to execute anymore. Because again, we are inside our while loop. Does that make sense? So we have a condition. If this condition is met, we break. But before we break, we want to be nice and tell them what's going on before we're exiting. So that's the second part of what we had to do in our, oopsie, let's see. Nope, that's not what I want. Let me go back to our code. So that's the second part of what we wanted to do. While loops being able to exit and break or continue. So we did an unknown number of iterations, which means we're able to just check whenever the amount owed is greater than 0, fine. We keep doing it and doing it. We did it about, let's see, how many times was it? 18. Yep, about 18 months. But now we realize that our balance is negative. If our balance is negative, we went ahead and added this piece of code to check if the balance is less than payment. If the balance is less than the payment, then we print that your last payment would be whatever it was. You paid it off in that number of months. So if I execute this right now, I can't remember what values I entered before, but let's try it again. 8,500. Percentage APR, let's try 0.04. It's getting lower. The payment is, let's make it $600. Now we got all the way to month number 14. We paid 600. Of that, the balance, sorry, the interest was about 2 cents. And now our balance was 100. With that balance of 100, it's definitely less than 600. So we said the last payment is that balance, and you paid off your loan in 15 months. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? So yeah, that would be a good way to check it out. But again, it's dynamic. If we didn't want it to be dynamic, we can go ahead and just hard code the values in there. So when you go in to buy a house or a car and so on, you know what you need to know is the price, your APR, how much your payment is. You see how long it will take you in months to pay it off. Or if you want to see how many months you're interested in, you put in the months and then you specify how many payments you need to make to be in that month. So you can switch that up around a little bit. Make sense?
Yeah, Prof, this is great, but this is only considering that we are making $500 monthly, and some companies have the flexibility that you can pay more than 500, right?
Yeah.
Whatever amount that you can pay, but the least amount needs to be this. But if you want to pay it off faster, you can increase to any amount you want monthly, and people can make payments maybe by monthly.
Yes. So again, that's something that you can throw in there. You can add options to your program, but you have to start bit by bit. You can add options and say, hey, it's month number 12. Do you want to make the same payment? Yes. Do you want to change your payment? Yes. What do you want to change it to? And so on and so forth. And then that way you can have that flexibility. But in this case, we are assuming that, you know, your payments are always going to be the same. So if you want, you can add another variable in there to say, okay, enter your payment amounts, you know, and you can specify, okay, on this month, the first 3 months, I'll pay this amount and so on and so forth. But yeah.
Thank you. I own the process. I was almost like, this is real. This is happening now.
Yeah. So this is exactly what you would do to make this work. If you want to change it to say you want to specify the number of months, okay, the number of times that you want to make your payment, that case would be, let me go back to our code. That will be looking at for loops with known number of iterations, okay? In that case, if we want to do that, all we have to do is, instead of doing a while loop, let me code that out, you need to do a for loop. So let's say for months in, again, remember that range that we talked about? Range in here, we want to use months. Now we want to specify how many months you want to pay it for. Let's say we want to pay for 48 months. That's 4 years. You can go ahead then and say, okay, for months within that, it's going to go ahead and run this 48 times. If you wanted to do it for 12 months, let's do 12. It's going to go ahead and run it for 12 times. But then we have to be careful. I don't want to go ahead and update the months. All I need to do then is subtract it. Okay, and then you say month number. Where is it? I can't see. Okay, that's months. Let's go down. Yep, I need to not print this out anymore. So made payments and so on and so forth, amount owed. Yep. So it's going to go through the iterations, but maybe I need to get another counter in here to be able to see what month it is that I'm making payments for. So month, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, actually, let's go ahead and print just month. Month number 1, I don't need to update this. Yeah. So let's try this out and see what happens this time around. Let's clear this. Execute that. How much is your car loan? Let's try 9,500. APR rates, let's try 0.06. How much is your monthly payment? 400. Now you can see that it's going to run for just those 12 months. So it starts with month number 0. I forgot about that. So it starts with month number 0. Why is that? It starts with month number 0 because when you use range, this range is going to start from 0 to let's see, let me write a comment. Range of 5 starts from 0 to 4. Does that make sense? So here it's starting from month 0 and it's going to end at month 11 because we had 12 in here. So it's starting from 0 to 11. So let me update this. 12 would have 0 to 11. So what we need to do is add 1 each time. And you should have the correct one. So except you want to consider month 0 as your down payment. But yeah, that gives you, in this case, a defined set. Like after 24, what was that? After 12, sorry, after 1 year, your balance is going to be 4,700. If you want to change that and do 2 years, and execute that. I remember the amounts I put in. Probably you pay it off in 2 years and so on and so forth. So those are all ways that you can use the for loop to look at defined range, or you can use the while loop to look at indefinite range, as we see here. Okay. So we've been able to test out the iterations, the breaks, and we also looked at ranges in both the indefinite and the defined loop. One thing we didn't talk about is iterables, but I don't want us to rush into that because that's what we'll be doing next week. Iterables, again, are just collections of stuff, collections of strings, collections of numbers, and so on and so forth. Sounds good? So this week, we've been able to look at conditional execution. Oops, I did not intend to click on that. Conditional executions and loops and iterations. So with loops and iterations, we've just looked at a bunch of practice questions. We also started off with initializing variables. As you can see, it's important that you set things up ahead of time, initialize them, and so on. We looked at while loops, for loops, how to break out of the loop or how to continue to the next iteration. We did some practicing, and obviously debugging got us good. We were able to kick ourselves out with an infinite loop, not very friendly, not very fun. And yeah, so a few things to note here. It's always good to plan. Plan how you want to approach your problem. Otherwise, you get into issues like I just did. So in programming, there's something known as pseudocode. So let's see if I can find one here to share with you guys. It asks you to write a program that will prompt the user for a score between 0 and 1. And then you get to tell them what grade they had based on that. So in order for you to write a program like this, it's good to have a plan, a game plan, right? So in programming, it's known as pseudocode, right? So pseudocode is pretty much just writing your code in plain English. Like I did here, I have a bunch of comments. That's what I need to do to be able to execute that. First, I'm going to set everything up. I'll get the user input. I'll validate that user's input. I'll check if the score is within that range, which was 0.1 to 1. And then if the score is greater than a certain number, I assign a particular grade and so on and so forth. Okay. So instead of doing 0 and 1 and 1.0, I did 0 and 100. Okay, that way it's just more user friendly. So to set things up, I'm going to have a variable, a bucket, a memory location. That is where I'm going to store my grade. Okay. So what I need to do is get the user's input. Because I know the user can be problematic, I probably want to use that try method, or sorry, that try statement or clause that I used earlier yesterday. So I get the score input, enter your score between 0 and 100, and convert it to a float. Now I need to check if the score is within a range. So if the score is within 0, and that is one of those logical operators we talked about. So in this case, this left sub expression has to be true, and the right sub expression has to be true before any of the code inside is going to run. If it's not true, all I'm going to get is skip to the else. If the score is outside the range. If the score is outside that range, it tells me your score is outside the range, blah, 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 case closed. If the user decides to type in ABC in this try, then he gets caught, tells you please enter a numeric score. But if the user is good, they enter a score between 0 and 9. All I do is I check if the score is equal to or more than 90, I print it out. or rather than print it out, I assign that grade that I used before. So I don't get to print it 10, 20, 30 times. I just give it a grade for each score. After I'm done giving the grade for each score, I go ahead and I print that your grade is whatever the grade was assigned to you. So if you didn't get over 60, then I'm going to give you an F. So if you want that, you should have something that says enter your score. So I do 56, you have an F. Run it again, enter your score, 87. Oh, what did I miss? 87 should be a B. But I think that might just be because my CPU is really used up. Yep, that's why. So your grade is B. And so on and so forth. So if I try running it again and I have 99, so my grade is A. So make sure you take some time, plan out your process, and then execute it. You can copy these comments and put them in each section. It's going to definitely help you out a lot. Sounds good?